I was born 1929 in Prague, which was in Czechoslovakia, which is now Czech Republic. My father was an engineer, my mother a homemaker, and I had a brother. By 1942, we were visited by the Gestapo. That was the German elite secret state police. In German it means Geheime Staatspolizei. So they came to our apartment and told us that to each of us pack one small piece of luggage, and they were taking us to the railroad station. And we went to Terezin, which was the first ghetto or camp that actually was a very nice place in comparison to which was coming up later. And at that time, like I say, it was 1942, I was 13 years old. I got a little job in Terezin as a gardener apprentice. So in the morning I would go on a work detail, and we stayed together as a family, so life was bearable. I mean, but comes 1944, and they take us to the train station, and then there are those cattle cars waiting, and they pack us in a car like sardines, and when those doors slammed, we just knew that this was not going to be good. We arrived in Auschwitz, which is in Poland. We had to line up, and we were tattooed. I had a number which was 82109. My father was in the same line with me. He was in front of me. He had 82108. My mother was in another line, and so was my older brother. And the fellow who did the tattooing, he was a Polish Jew who was also there. He was already wearing his striped pajamas. There was a uniform that you had to wear there. And he pointed to over there and said, "You see that chimney, the smoke coming out?" And I said, "Yeah." He says, "Well, you're going to be going before Dr. Mengele, and if he doesn't think that you're capable of work, that's where you're going to wind up." We had to undress. I was 15 years old, naked, skinny kid, and I go before Dr. Mengele, and in German I said to him, "Ich kann arbeiten." So when you go in front of him, you see a German in a black uniform. He had a monocle and those boots, and I still see those in front of me. And he had a baton in his hand, and with a baton he would point to this door or to that door. Later on we found out that the door what I went through was the one which led to the barracks. The other door would lead to the what they call the showers, and there were young children, women, elderly, sickly, and naked, standing and waiting for the showers. Well, instead of showers, water coming out, they would throw down cyanide tablets, and everybody there would be gassed, and then they would be cremated. So that's how they got the word crematorium. They issued us a blanket and a mess kit, and everybody would go on their work detail, and then in the evening you would line up and you would get a meal. That was the only meal you get once a day. They would give you some soup, and if anybody was trying to get ahead because they were so hungry, they were just beaten up. They used any occasion for you to get beaten if you didn't obey something. And the work details, they were very hard labor. They made you cut out stones and break them up and then build something out of it, and then the next day another detail would come and take it apart, and just to make you work, very, very hard. You had no idea what was going on the outside. I mean, and then you had to stay and wait to be counted. And the worse the weather was, the longer they let you stand. I mean, they were just so sadistic, and they tried to destroy you, not just your soul, but your body. And then one morning at 6 o'clock, after we were washed up, the sirens were blasting, and they marched us to the entrance of the camp. where we had to witness that the work detail which went out earlier, they were bringing back because one of our men there tried to escape. So what they did was they took off his shoes and socks, and he had to walk in the snow and ice. And as he was walking, they were beating him because he tried to escape. And so then they marched that man who tried to escape to a platform which they built, and we had to watch him being hung. And then the loudspeakers would come on and they would say, anybody ever tried to escape, this is what you can expect. And then for the next 3 days, right after we would wash up, they marched us in front of the, to watch him. He was still hung, was still hanging there. And again, the loudspeakers would, tell you, make sure that you were frightened enough that you would never try to do. There was also on the, in the camp, they had a hospital which was run by the Germans, and what they would do is they would bandage you, but they would also do experiments on you. They would inject you with bacteria to see how you react, and if there were any women there from the work detail, they would sterilize them, and they would just do horrible things. So now in 1945, in January, after we got out of the barracks in the morning to wash up, they told us to go back to the bunk bed and to pick up our blanket and our mess kit, and they marched us out. And then later, the reason they did that was that the Russian army was coming through Germany toward Poland, and they didn't want the Russians to free us. So they took us on a march. Later I found out it was a march to nowhere, and it was freezing cold. All of us were just wearing our striped pajamas and underwear. We still had some, and I think my shoes were already just so broken that you feel the snow and you feel, the cold and everything else. At night, they would put us up in a farmhouse and they would bring us the soup, so that was the only meal we would have. Then on the way, as we were marching, I would see signs saying so many kilometers to the railroad station. There were so many of us who couldn't walk anymore, so the truck would come and it would put you on a truck and you would never see the people anymore. Now about the 4th day on the march, after spending, one night each in a farmhouse, in the snow I saw something black in front of me, and I stepped out really fast, and to look at it and grabbed it, somebody dropped a backpack, in Europe they call it a rucksack, and I picked it up and put my little blanket over it. And in the evening, when we got to the farmhouse, I looked through it, and there was some civilian clothing. And I think what happened was they also marched out the German workers, which were the cooks and maintenance people and their families, because they also didn't want them to be taken in by the Russians. So somebody must have dropped it and not picked it up. To date, I will never know how it's possible that they wouldn't have picked it up. But anyway, I kept thinking there's so many of us who couldn't walk anymore. They would take him away on trucks, and then a few kilometers later we would be counted again. And I kept thinking that maybe by then they lost track how many there were, because they were always counting us, get to stop, and so many. So about the 5th or 6th day in a farmhouse, I started thinking that maybe they lost count, and we're so close to the railroad station, and now I have civilian clothes I could put on over my striped uniform. So what I did, in the morning, I put it over my other clothes, And then when they marched everybody out, I kept hidden in the hay there. It was in that farmhouse. And then I waited till the Germans, the workers, were marching by, and I would follow them, and they were going to the railroad station. So as we got closer to the train, I started running toward the train and calling out in German, Mutti, Mutti, wo bist du? Mother, mother, where are you? And I acted like one of the workers' kids, got separated from mother, and I got on a train and sat down and just eyes forward, and the SS and the Meerha and the dogs, they kept coming back and forth in the train, and I just didn't look to the left or right and just sat there. And I got off in Prague. And then we landed at Ellis Island, and then there was the Statue of Liberty, which just looks beautiful to me, just being free.